Hello, welcome to the Asian Dating Podcast. Today I have matchmaker friend Gabriella Arito, who was born and raised in Berkeley, California, and has lived in San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. And an outdoor and wilderness enthusiast, she now resides near Aspen, Colorado. She is a matchmaker of her own firm, KISS, Keeper Introduction Services, a boutique matchmaking firm with clients across the nation. She was a featured presenter at the Matchmaking Institute's London 2018 Summit, speaking on matchmaking as a collaborative process. You can also see Gabriella's matchmaking in action on the Learning Channel's hit 2022 show, I Am Shauna Ray. Welcome to the show. I'm going to call you
Hi,
Gabby
May.
because that's what I
Yeah,
know you as,
yeah, I
Gabby.
know. Call me Gabby. Hey,
Yeah.
May.
Hi.
We're just a couple of California girls living in a Colorado world.
I know it's so cold here.
It
Yeah,
is so
I'm
cool.
just, it's really taking me a little bit to get used to this winter, but usually I'm good. Usually I'm like, oh, it's no big deal. I just bundle up and turn on the heat and stuff. But this year has been extremely cold for me. How are you doing over there near Aspen?
Oh, well, I have a little fireplace. I should probably be running it more. It's in my living room, which isn't the place I end up spending a lot of time, which I do in my den. I wish I had a fireplace in my den. But it hasn't been terrible this year. Like today is a very sunny day out with not a lot of snow. But I moved officially to Colorado in 2020, but I've been coming to Colorado my whole life. But it is an adjustment to start going through these winters when you grow up. I mean, I'm a Bay Area kid, and then I lived most of my adult life in LA. So when did you come out to Colorado?
7 years ago. 7 years
Yeah.
ago.
Are you
And
used to it yet?
yeah, I can adapt pretty well. I'm like a chameleon, and I was just remembering the time that I first met you in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, in
You
Beverly
worked
Hills.
at Talkify still, right?
I worked at Talkify for 4 years and then left them and started my own firm. Yes. But I think
Okay.
when we met in Beverly Hills, I was somewhere in my Talkify journey.
Yes, yes. Well, welcome to the show today. And we're just going to talk about kind of your clientele, like the people that love the outdoors, mountainy, skiing people. Like, tell me,
Yeah.
how did you start your business and why did you pick kind of this niche? And tell me a little bit about your client base.
I almost feel like in a funny way they picked me. I just kept looking at the people who kept hiring me, and they all had so much in common. They're all skiers, hikers, bikers, big outdoor enthusiasts. And I just sort of realized, oh, I have a niche. I didn't realize it, but I have a niche. I myself enjoy fly fishing. I do a lot of hiking in the summer. I tried to get back into skiing pretty recently, but I just had a skiing injury, and now I'm wondering whether I'll not get back into skiing. But I used to ski, and so places that I've spent a lot of time in Colorado, I'm a lot less so in a place like Denver, and I've spent a lot of my time in Telluride, and then I finally settled outside of Aspen in 2020. So it's a largely the types of people who live in these towns. Now, I work nationally, so I have clients in LA and San Francisco and Chicago and Miami and New York. But weirdly enough, they tend to sort of be the same types of people. They might live in LA, but they like to go to Vail on ski trips. They might live in New York, but they might have a summer home in Durango. So somehow I just keep signing the same types. They're usually really fit. I don't think I have a single overweight client or hardly anyone in my database who's overweight or unhealthy. No one smokes. They're all, kind of live in that healthy lifestyle. And some of it's just, I went to a couple of Ivy League schools myself. And I think in general, the people who gravitate towards me are sort of driven type A people, marathon runners with Stanford degrees, that sort of person. I have a lot of people like that. I have an ultra marathoner who's a Stanford doctor. So somehow it just kind of, and then I think what ends up happening is when that type of clientele keeps finding you then start to sort of target that clientele, and it just becomes this snowball.
So how many clients at a time do you serve, and how do how do you set them up based on what criteria?
So I would say I like to have like between 10 and 13 clients is a pretty comfortable amount for me. It can go up and go down depending. Like I just was on the cover of the Aspen Times with an article about me that got me a couple more clients. Then I match them and then they're on pause. That kind of thing. I have a couple people engaged right now, so they're not working with me. So, the number of people who are actively working with me can vary. So like many other matchmakers, I have a database. Mine is free to enter. Some people charge for entering their database. Mine is keeperintros.com, and it's completely free to put a profile in. So I get people coming into my database every day. I also use a lot of social media, like my personal Facebook page has been very fruitful for me for finding matches. I do a lot of going out and networking. So I just published an article in a magazine, my third time publishing in a magazine called Mind, Body, Soul, which is about sort of for people kind of on the path of personal development who also spend a lot of time doing outdoors things. And the party for the recent publication for this month's publication is tonight. I'll go to that. I'm sure I'll meet people. I go to a lot of networking events in Aspen and a lot of things out in Aspen. So I'll meet people there, and even tourists coming in on their planes from wherever they live, flying in on their jets. I end up meeting a lot of them. I'm having a drink soon with somebody who works at the private FBO here, the private plane. She's, knows a lot of the pilots who come in, the pilots who are flying the clients in. And so she knows a lot of people. So we're going to go out and we're going to talk about some single people who are coming in on their planes. So it just, how it is when you get into this business, it's almost remarkable where clients come from. I, whether it's my fly fishing guide or a ski instructor I met or who knows, but somehow my phone keeps ringing and people keep finding me. And then I go out and I keep finding people for them. Is that how it works for you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I am in the midst of putting together a profile for a very, very ultra high net worth gentleman. And it's great to be able to have that as a person that you're searching for, because a lot of women want to meet him. So then he pairs off with somebody, and then you have a success story. And like you said, it just snowballs into more and more clients. But I think the part that we have an advantage with working with our small number of clients is that we can pay really good attention to them. And if we have a
Definitely.
niche, kind of like my niche is any men who want to date Asian women, right? So Asian women that want to be part of my database, they go to 2asianmatchmakers.com, fill out a profile.
Mhm.
But then it's like I have this database of women who want to meet this type of guy. So it's actually an advantage for the women, right, to sign up with me if that's the type of guy they want to meet. And it's an advantage for people in your database who sign up, because that's who they're going to be setting up with, right? Like the people that you
I
have.
tell everyone
Yeah.
single, like there's no reason you shouldn't be going to matchmakers databases and be putting yourself in those databases. Some people charge to go into a database. Maybe you want to consider whether that's something you want to do with your money. But a lot of people like you, like me, and many, many other matchmakers have free databases. And why not go in? Now, are you necessarily going to get a call from that matchmaker? No, not necessarily. I would even say your probabilities are low rather than being somebody's client where you're guaranteed to start meeting people. But it takes 10 or 15 minutes to put a good profile into a matchmaker's database. So you might as well do it if you're single. The worst case scenario is you never hear from them. The best case scenario is they call you up whenever, a week later, a year later,
Yeah.
and say, "Hey, you're in my database, and I just pulled your profile out, and I want to tell you about a client that maybe you want to meet." So it's a really good thing to do if you're single.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't know about this when I was single. Obviously, I had to just meet my husband the old fashioned way at work. Just
Oh,
kidding.
you did? You met at work? Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So, knowing what you know now about dating and about your matchmaking database and things like that, what are some of the things that you've done personally to make yourself a better dater or advice you would give a sister or a cousin or a good girlfriend? What would you say to the women out there who are looking?
Yeah, well, unlike you, I'm still single. So I not only am a matchmaker, but I'm also in the process of attempting to match myself and being very much in the trenches of the dating world. I think the most important thing is to take action. You need to take some action, but at the same time, you also want to be sort of surrendered to the idea that your life may go in a different direction than you think it's going to go in. And you still have to be happy in the moment. And I think one of the pitfalls I personally get in is I have this Achilles heel with men where I start to sort of fantasize very quickly about the future. And I start to behave on my fantasy about what our connection is and about what we're going to be in the world instead of on the reality of what's happening in the moment. And it's really hard for me to pull back and say, okay, I'm dreaming of like incredible global travels with this man who I find so interesting and fascinating and who makes me laugh. But in reality, he texted me once this week, and it wasn't even a text message where he was suggesting that we see each other. And I have to really learn to pull back out of my own fantasy life. So I'm assuming because I do these things that there are also a lot of other women who make that same mistake.
So how do you navigate through that? How do you pull yourself back? What do you do to snap yourself back into reality? Like, oh shoot, nothing's happened yet.
It's almost like I have to divide my brain and I have to say, okay, I'm a woman with a rich fantasy life, and that can live on the left side of my brain, and I can enjoy the rich fantasy that I'm having. But I have to remember that I can't act on that. I have to take my action on the right side of my brain where I'm taking a look at what he's really doing and what he's really saying and the kind of actual genuine effort he's putting in and the feeling I'm getting from him in terms of the warmness of his communication, the frequency of his communication. And so really for me, a lot of it has been letting myself have the fantasies and being okay that I'm a person who has those fantasies, as long as I know how to contain them in a different part of my brain and maybe even on some level enjoy them. Where I get into trouble is where I start to let the fantasy part leak into the reality part. And then I'm behaving in ways that aren't appropriate reactions. I really feel it's almost like a poker table. If someone puts a chip on, you put a chip on. If someone puts 2 chips on, maybe you put 2 chips on. But you don't put 10 chips out when someone's put 1 chip out. And if you're deep in your fantasy world, you might be doing things like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So you catch yourself doing that and try to be more aware as you're dating.
Yes.
So as a matchmaker, are you having a matchmaker set you up, or are you doing online dating, or how's that going?
All of the above. So
Okay.
I'm chatting with someone right now that a matchmaker you and I both know from the conference thought might be a good match for me. We had a video call. We've had a phone call, and we have a dinner planned when we're all in New York for the next matchmaking conference. I'm going to have dinner with him. So sometimes matchmakers set me up. I do online date. I find it, like many other people, very exhausting, but I really think it's almost like a gym. I just go like, hit it 10 minutes today, hit it 15 minutes today, or hit it 3 times a week for 20 minutes. And, and I do have fruitful matches from online. And then, like everybody else, I think it's really good to ask your friends and your family, let them know that you're single. And then I go out to Chamber of Commerce events. I go out to Business Connect events. I get involved in activities that are fun for me. Maybe I'll go to a wine tasting or something like that. So I really try to be out there too. My feeling is in finance, they talk about multiple streams of income. I'm a big fan of multiple streams of income. Matchmaking is my main bread and butter, but I have a little bit of income from real estate, and I have a couple of other sort of like side things that I do in like publishing and some things like that. So much the same, I tell people, it's okay to have multiple streams of dates. You should have your matchmaker. You should also have an online profile. You should also be going to events, whether it's pickleball or, a group travel event, all of these kinds of things. Just keep opening doors because you don't really know which one the right person is going to walk in. And by the way, I tell my clients, they always say they're a little nervous. They go, God, can I be on Bumble while I'm working with you? And I say, are you kidding? My favorite call is when you call me up and you say, Gaby, let's pause me. I just met somebody. Yeah. That's, I'm here as your partner in trying to find love. Is it wonderful if I find you that love? It's wonderful, but it's just wonderful if you find love.
So how many dating apps do you suggest a client who's working with you also be on, in addition to expanding their search criteria and potential?
Well, a lot of that is personal. I'm personally on one, like one's enough for me. And I think it depends on your spirit. Some people really enjoy a lot of engagement and a lot of writing to people. Other people find being online absolutely soul crushing. I don't want my clients to be doing things that feel soul crushing for them, because I don't think it gives you the right energy. But myself, I actually enjoy chatting 3 days a week to 1 or 2 people on Bumble for 5 or 10 minutes. I find that an enjoyable activity. It almost like for me is a little bit of socialization. And, I like, a little sparring, a little sparky talk, a little banter. But some people, they don't really have good text game. And they just find that they feel bogged down and confused. So I would say that decision is really highly individual.
So if you don't have good text game, do you recommend the woman or the man right away say, hey, let's meet up in person? Or are you free Tuesday or Friday? Are you available for drinks? Do you suggest women ask the dates?
So it's so funny you say that. I really think that getting to an in-person date as soon as possible is always best. Always try to get to an in-person date. As a woman, I don't really like asking men out. In general, I like men to take the leads. I always think of it like a boat. Like a boat that crosses a river. On one bank of the river is being single. On the other bank of the river is being in a relationship. And the boat has to go. And my personal feeling is I'm happier when the man is paddling the boat and I'm sitting in the boat going along with his paddling. However, that being said, I think there's good ways to hint. For example, hey, you live in Golden? I was going to be passing through Golden in 2 weekends when I'm going to see my best friend from college who lives out there. Or just things like, hey, I don't know about your schedule, but the week after next, I have a lot of flexibility. So I'll do things where I'm not necessarily saying, can you meet me Thursday at this restaurant? But I'm opening it up to see whether they bite. And by the way, for me, a lot of times, if I make a couple openings like that, where I'm opening it up and he's not biting, then I really begin to get the hint that he could be someone who wants to text message with me for 6 months and never get to a date. And that's just a no-go for me. I don't want pen pals, and I certainly don't want multiple pen pals. So if they're not taking the bait, when I say, oh, you live in Denver, I live in Basalt, Vail's about halfway. It's really easy for me to get to Vail.
If he doesn't take the lead or ask you out, then you stop communicating with him.
I do.
Okay. Do the men 50% of the time take the hint and ask you out, or 20% or 80%? Where do they land? How bright are they?
It's so interesting you ask. I always think about there's men who will show so much conviction for a woman. They will call her all the time. They will beg to see when she's free. They really want to see her again. By the end of the first date, they're asking her for the second date. I love men like that. I like to feel like a lot of conviction and a lot of planning. And then there are men that they like you. They just don't know how, they're just very passive about getting there. And ultimately for me, those men, they're probably just not going to work as well. And so I kind of just let them fall off the wayside. I might even delete them after 2 or 3 weeks. If I've put it out there a couple of times, clearly dropping my own availability and they're not picking it up, I might just wake up one morning and kind of clean house and just delete 3 of them and go, you know what? This guy, he's not showing enough action and enough conviction. And I know that I will come across men who do, and I'm not going to have to work so hard.
So would you suggest to the men listening out there that they just need to ask the women out and just go for it? Just,
Yeah.
you might as well, after a couple texting back and forth, just go on that 0 date or first date.
I have a sort of pithy motto for men in dating, and it's grow up, show up, follow up. And if you can grow up, show up, and follow up again and again and again, you will find a great woman who will be your partner. I personally think a lot of men who aren't partnered have not grown up, shown up, and followed up, and then put it on repeat. They're not paddling the boat from single to relationship. And I honestly feel like they say about voting, so goes Ohio, so goes the nation. I have my personal feeling is so goes the man's personality, so goes the relationship. I think men are very much in charge about how a relationship goes. And if they're a man who's going to show up consistently, make dates consistently, get loyal to one woman, learn her love language and provide for her in that love language and speak her love language to her, he'll get her.
Yeah.
He'll get her.
Are you saying that if there's a listener out there right now who wants to wine and dine you or woo you, that's all they have to do is like make dates with Gaby, text her, call her, invite her to go do things, pursue her.
Yeah.
And once they do those things, they get your attention. And that's when your feelings for them would start to develop as you get to know them. Like, is it that easy to find a woman like yourself who's pretty successful, pretty accomplished, have your career, educated, confident? Is that all it takes for the man listening to pursue a woman, is to do those 3 things you said?
I think my personal feeling is it's a lot easier for men than they think that it is.
Right.
I know most single women I know are desperately yearning for a man who's a good man to show up consistently and continue to pursue her, make her feel like she's important, take her on dates, move the relationship into a commitment in a normal, healthy time range. So somewhere between maybe anywhere between 3 or 4 weeks to 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And then, show her that you want a future with her and continue to paddle it that way. I think a lot of what happens in society today is men aren't doing that. Then maybe women are trying to do that. And then the roles are getting reversed. It's freaking everybody out. The women really don't like it, but they do it because they don't know what else to do at this point. The men kind of like the ego stroke of having women pursue them. But at the end of the day, a lot of men are a little blocked to actually fall in love with a woman who's doing the paddling of the relationship.
Very interesting. Have you had a guy that did those things and you're like, and you got in a relationship with him?
Yeah, I have. I was just someone texted me this morning who 4 years later, he's still texting me. He did all the things. He did all these things. Now he had a drinking problem and he smoked cigarettes, chain smoked cigarettes. He was English and he was like out of Peaky Blinders. He like drank a lot of whiskey, smoked a lot of cigarettes. He even talked like someone out of Peaky Blinders. I happen to love that show, but he wasn't the right match for me because of the smoking and the drinking. But aside from those things, otherwise I probably would have married him. We went through me trying to get him to quit these things, but in truth, I started feeling like his mommy telling him not to smoke. especially being a real health enthusiast myself. I knew that that just wasn't something that I was going to be able to live with well. So, and at the end of the day, I said, you know what? I don't need to tell you to quit smoking. You're an adult and you can smoke. You just can't smoke and be in a relationship with me. So, but I do think that at least for me, men who have consistently followed these paths, they get me. The men who don't get me are the men who are inconsistent, who come on saying things to me really strong about wanting to be with me, but then don't text me for 3 weeks. The men who only text and don't call, I think that that's a big red flag. The men who seem to like do a lot of rubber banding, you know, they seem really interested and then suddenly they get spooked by their own intimacy and then they back up. And then I wonder if it's my fault. And then I go into a really sad funk about it. And then when they come back, it's usually when I've moved on to start thinking about somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of these kinds of games get played, but I think with a guy, he will marry the right girl if he shows up in an adult, mature way, in a consistent way, in a loving way. Don't you?
So that is, yeah, that's a great plan for what a guy should do. What are some things based on your male clients, what they wish women would do?
It's so interesting. I think the big thing about my male clients in general is that they want large age differentials. And that to me is almost always their biggest downfall. I've talked about this a lot when I've gone on podcasts and things, you know, whether it's Hollywood exposure, seeing, you know, George Clooney with someone, seeing all these gray haired men with much younger women. And by the way, I sometimes date a guy with gray hair and I don't have gray hair. So that actually emerges in my life. And I certainly have dated men who have been older. But the truth of the matter is, the big hang up is having an expectation right off the bat that the woman you're going to be dating is just, let's just start at 15 years younger. We'll go somewhere between 15 and 25 years. And they don't realize that is really rare. And that women who are 15 years younger, if they're very attractive and very athletic and they have a lot going for themselves, that's not what they're going to necessarily be wanting to sign up with. So for men, I always say the best thing you can do for yourself is get closer to dating your age. And men, when they hear this, they're just horrified. A lot of men, they're just horrified, even though when they were in college, they dated girls that were in college with them. Many of these men in their 20s married someone who was their age or even a couple years older. But now that they're this age, they have this expectation. And I think it does them a huge disservice because they're always trying to go for a woman who's 15 or 20 years younger, who's a really, really attractive woman. And that's not what she wants to date.
So you're saying that the men that you sign up are looking for that 15, 20 years younger or no?
Oh, they usually start that way, but I work them into a lot of convincing that getting closer to their age is going to be better for them. They're going to get less rejection. They're going to have more in common. They're going to feel a sense of peer. I think there's a thing in our society that values women on their youth. It's not a very nice thing as a woman because you don't like the sense that as you age, you lose your value. It's a terrible feeling. Whereas I feel like men don't have that as much as women. And it's really unhealthy for women and it's unhealthy for society at large. But in general, what men forget is that the whole value of real partnership might be easier to find with somebody who relates to you in a lot of different ways. So, for example, I've had, men in their 50s want to date women in their 30s, and then they come back. They're like, well, she was on Instagram 5 times during the day. And I go, yeah, because in her generation, that's a totally normal thing to do when you go out with somebody. It's not normal if you're 57 to be on your phone, but it's normal when you're 35 to be on your phone. And so if you don't like things, and the other thing, the complaint that I get a lot about maybe someone in their early 30s or their mid 30s is things like Adderall. It's like, well, did you know that they take Adderall every day? I've never taken something. And I go, that's a generational thing. Those kids they all got on Adderall, and they still take those kinds of medications. That wasn't something that Gen Xers did. We didn't have Adderall.
Right. So what else do your male clients wish the women would do more, aside from being okay with the age difference? What else are men looking for?
I think that as a woman, it's really nice to occasionally pay for things. That doesn't mean taking him out to dinner. I think that you should take him out to dinner on his birthday, or if it's maybe a special event, like he got a promotion at work and that was special to him, take him out to dinner, pick up the dinner bill that night. But aside from maybe not picking up the dinner bill, there's other ways to contribute to a man that he's going to really appreciate. What if his favorite band is playing and you buy the tickets and you present them to him? He'll be so happy. What if you show up at his house with his favorite bottle of wine or his favorite scotch? What if you were out shopping and you see a tie that you think he would just look so handsome in? I say, don't buy gifts. Don't buy him a gift if he doesn't buy you gifts. But if he's bought you gifts, it's nice to occasionally buy him something back. So I think a lot of the men, they feel like they've been used for their pocketbook a lot. And it's nice when they see a woman who's willing to show a gesture that she's going to make a financial contribution as well, and that she's willing to put her money where her mouth is as well. Men really, really appreciate that. Now, that doesn't mean you should be supporting a man. I don't think that that's a good idea. But I'm talking about, why don't you come in at 20% or 15%? And some of that depends, by the way, on your incomes and your net worths and your salaries and things like that. If he makes a lot more money than you do, maybe, your gestures to him are smaller. But if you're earning the equivalent that he earns, or maybe earning more, and he's been paying when you guys go out, I think it's probably really time to show up at his door with takeout.
I love it. I love it. I love these great ideas that women can contribute in the relationship. Like you said, 15%, 20% financially. And if you go out and, you're done with dinner and you maybe go get ice cream across the street, it's okay to offer to pay for getting the dessert or ice cream, or like you said, a bottle of wine, or maybe she likes to bake cookies. She can bake him some batches of cookies every now and then. Like, these gestures really go a long way, I think.
As long as they don't become chasing. I think where a woman can get in trouble is if she's doing these things to fulfill an agenda to get the guy, and then there's a chasing element. But if these are in reciprocation to his generosity towards you, and then speaking of his generosity towards you, thank you. You have to say thank you to men a lot. Yeah. And I mean, every single time he pays for dinner, you say, thank you. Thank you for taking me out to dinner. I really appreciate that. Thank you for picking me up. Thank you for driving me. I think there are words, there are key phrases that I think men and women really have lost that I think are very helpful. For men, the key phrase is, when can I see you again? The phrase, when can I see you again, can be the difference between having a life partner and not having a life partner. And for women, I think a lot of times the key phrase is just, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm really grateful you did that. Because women can start to get used to the fact that these things are being done for them. And on some level, the guy, he'll keep doing it because he thinks it's his duty. But it's not going to feel the same for him knowing that you recognized it and that you verbalized your appreciation.
Yeah, I agree. I think oftentimes after a date, a guy could spend $100, $150, $200 on a date. I mean, that's a lot of money, right? And for the woman to not even say thank you or a gesture of appreciation or acknowledgement that he picked up the bill, he can just feel like, gosh, she has a sense of entitlement. And what a great way to not get a second date, ladies, to just not even acknowledge and to thank somebody. I mean, you would even thank your own platonic friend if they bought you dinner, right? You would thank them at the door. You would thank them when you say bye. When you got out of the car, you would text them when you got home. You would probably text them again the next day. to say thank you to just a regular friend? Like, why wouldn't you just thank a guy? Even though you have no interest in him, I still think it's worth a thank you to acknowledge that. I agree with you, Gabby. I feel like that has been lost.
I do
So,
too. I think women, I hear a lot of the same complaints from men because my client list is mostly male. I usually keep about 80% male clients, 20% female clients. And a lot of my clients are men who are divorced. Sometimes they've been divorced twice. Sometimes they're younger. I have a client right now who's never been married down in Denver, but a lot of my clients are divorcees. And the truth of the matter is, the same complaints come up and up and up again around the sense that women started assuming that everything should be handed to them on a silver platter.
yeah, I
On the
agree.
other hand, I have to say that these same men, I can sometimes see them get interested in women who are the same type of women. And so if you're a man complaining that there are all these women out there and they take you for granted and they take advantage of you, the real question is there a piece of you that kind of likes it? Is there a piece of you that gravitates towards that woman? Because the more entitled the woman is, or the more narcissistic she is, the more you think that she's come some kind of catch because she thinks of herself that way. And so then you get to feel gratified that you have such a good catch that she doesn't even need to bother thanking you. So you have to watch your own stuff too.
Yes, yes, I agree. I agree. You mentioned some guys might be divorced twice. Do you come across a lot of clients that have been divorced twice? And what are your thoughts as a single woman out there? Is that a red flag for you to date a guy that's been divorced twice or not really?
For me, it's okay. And I'll tell you why. It depends on the divorces. A lot of times the first marriage was very young, way too young. I'm talking about 22 years old, 23 years old. If you got married when you were 22 or 23 and it worked out, bravo. But a lot of people, your brain isn't even fully formed till you're 26. And a lot of people who get married young, they might have done it because they were religious and they were in a church group and they weren't supposed to be having sex unless they were married. They might have done it because they lived somewhere like the South where that's what you did. You married your high school sweetheart or your college sweetheart. You did it right after college. You started to have babies right away. So it might have been the pressure of people around them. There's all kinds of reasons somebody might have married young. And then a lot of times those marriages didn't last very long. For me, a lot of it has to do whether there's red flags for me about somebody married or not is largely about if they have come to take personal responsibility for whatever element of the marriage didn't work, that was their fault. All divorces took two to tango. And I do think that a lot of times there can be a real malignant narcissist in a marriage, or there can be somebody who just is making things so difficult. And it can really be swayed on one side. But in many cases, what happens are dynamics and cycles and passive aggressive behaviors that start because people aren't listening to each other and they're starting to punish each other in these ways. And the man that I like to talk to is the man who went through his divorces and recognized what his own faults were and decided that he was going to change.
So if a divorced gentleman, divorced twice, communicated that with you, you would feel better about it. But if he was blaming it on just her or blaming it on other circumstances, then you feel like, oh, he probably didn't really learn anything and didn't really self-reflect, then that would be more of a red flag for you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, a lot of times, I mean, I've gone on a lot of dates where men will tell me that the person they had been with was borderline, or they'll say she was crazy, or there'll be these kinds of like broad sweeping judgments of her. And yet I sometimes wonder whether they ever wondered if any of their behaviors elicited some of this.
Right.
So she might have done these things. She might have done them, but do you think that in some ways you might have provoked some of this, and that the cycle that the two of you got in was her way of coping with the cycle, and you had your way of coping with the cycle, and all you can do now is point the finger and blame? So that's not, to me, an enlightened man.
So what would he say to you that you would feel like, okay, I'm okay dating him? Like, what words out of his mouth as we're role playing would make you feel like, okay, he's he's good. I'm okay getting to know him better. What
I really wasn't listening to what my wife was trying to tell me. I had my own agenda and I was trying to fulfill it. She had a love language and I didn't respect her love language. For me, physical touch was my love language and hers was gifts. So, I was very angry about the fact that she cut sex off with me or cut intimacy off with me. But the truth of the matter is, I never brought her flowers. I never thought for her birthday about, I got her gift card, for her birthday instead of thinking about something really special for her that she would love. I mean, when a guy is like, oh, yeah, I get it. Hers was important. Hers was as important to her as mine was to me. And I didn't get that. Now I get it. Things like that. Those kinds of things make me think, this guy, he's waking up to trying to put himself in the shoes of somebody else. And by the way, I will tell you, that's the rarer man I talk to. I would say in general, most men I talk to are still just kind of laying the blame out.
Interesting. So is there an age range or age that you think, gosh, he's never been married? That's a red flag. Are there guys that, as you're swiping right, swiping left, never been married? Like, what age is it that you feel like, I don't think I want to get to know him? How can he never have been married at that age?
I try not to be too judgy because I'm a never married myself. So I can understand there are a lot of reasons why someone may not have been married. They might have been in an 8-year relationship where they really were trying to get themselves mentally in, but they were really, really feeling like this wasn't the right thing. There might have been, some people who get married, they force themselves into a marriage they don't really want. And someone who's not married maybe just doesn't have that same kind of constitution. I feel a little bit like that about myself. Whereas I think a lot of friends I had kind of ended up just going, well, I guess he'll do. It's time. My other friends are doing it. I'll overlook all the things I don't like. That's always been harder for me to be that type of person. So I try not to be super judgy about guys who've never been married. I would say though, that when I meet men, as I often do in my work or see them out and about, and they're 60 or 65, and they're still talking about now it's time to start a family. And they're saying, well, I want to meet someone, who's 34 or 35, so I could date her for a year and she'd still have time to have 2 kids with me. I'm thinking to myself, you just at 60 years old, you just decided that like this is time for children for you. Because I actually know many women who've gone ahead and had kids on their own at this point, and they usually did it somewhere between 40 and 50. And I even know a couple of men who went ahead and had kids on their own. They got surrogates, they got egg donors, and they had kids on their own. So I think if you're 65, thinking you're going to date a 35-year-old because now you've decided you want kids, you really didn't want them enough to make it happen for yourself in a normal time. And now I think it's just an excuse to date younger.
Right. So what if he's 65, but he's never been married, but he's open to dating women up to his age? That's not really a red flag for you, right?
It isn't for me because, life works differently for different people. And maybe that's when he found the right person. My mother met someone at 75 who was 76. They moved in together 2 months later, and they've been together ever since. And they will say that this is their best relationship. I mean, my mother had had a handful of relationships in her life, including my father, before she got into this relationship. And yet now this is the relationship that's really the right relationship for her. And her partner had been married for a long time and didn't want the marriage to end. but the marriage ended. And then he got into a short relationship and then started dating my mother. And he will say, like, this is so much better than my marriage ever was. And so I try not to pass too much judgment on what people are going through on their personal journey at their time frame.
I love it. I love it. So, Gaby, in closing, tell people how they can find you. And of course, I will include all of your bio and information as well. But just any parting words about if they want to work with you, how do they find you? What's your specialty? And we'll close with that.
Yeah, you can email me at Gaby, Gaby, at Keeper Intros, like you're my keeper, Keeper Intros or keeperintroductions.com. You can also go to my website, keeperintroductions.com, and enter a profile into my website. That's free. You can call me, 310-729-0992 is my cell. I usually let things go to voicemail and then return calls. So you're welcome to call me. I would say my main type of client is somebody very active. My ages tend to range from about 38 is my youngest client right now. And I just signed a 77-year-old whose father was a famous mountaineer and his son is a mountaineer. And at 77, he still goes out skiing every single day and loves to climb and hike. So, I take people of all ages, but they do tend to be very active, youthful, fit people. But, I'm really open. I tend to take men, but if you're a woman where you go, hey, lots of skiing and lots of hiking and lots of biking is my thing, and those are the men that I want to meet, then you can call me too, because I probably know a lot of them. So those are all the ways. And I'd love to chat with somebody, anybody. And I always just like to hear people's stories too. I always like to just get to know a little bit about who you are and what you're looking for and, say hello. It never hurts.
Well, Gaby, thank you so much for joining me today. I so appreciate it. I feel like we could just talk for another hour just about
Thank you,
anything
May.
and everything. So
Yeah, well, we were airplane buddies on our last coming back from our last alliance meeting, so maybe we'll get another chance to fly in and out of Denver together soon and get some airplane time together.
Thank you, Gaby. And for those of you out there who want to be in my database, if you're a nice Asian woman all across the US, I'm always looking for fit, nice, kind Asian women ages 21 to 71. And you can find me at twoasianmatchmakers.com. And please like this video, subscribe, tell your friends about it, share it, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, May.